Election Watch Analysis here, and welcome back to our 2024 election prediction. Today on our prediction map, we have Andy Beshear as the Democratic nominee. If you didn't know, Andy Beshear is the current governor of Kentucky, and if you know anything about Kentucky's political leanings, you may know that Kentucky was a solid red state in 2020 and has been like that for quite a while. So it's kind of strange that it would have a Democratic governor, but as you can see here, he actually narrowly won election back in 2019 against a Trump-backed candidate whom he unseated. So Beshear is a very strong candidate, especially for the Democrats, being a red state Democrat, of course, and his coalition consists of suburbanites, urban voters, and actually blue-collar voters who Donald Trump is very strong with. Of course, Trump is the opposing candidate in the side, a very strong candidate with blue-collar voters, working class, and even some working class or rural minorities who has made gains with recently. But anyway, let's get started with this 2024 election prediction. So I'll start off with Andy Beshear's safe states. He'll win the Pacific Coast by a safe margin, of course Hawaii, I think Colorado as well, Illinois, and of course the Eastern Seaboard, New York, Maine's 1st District, and that will be all. For Donald Trump, of course, much of the Midwest would be safe, though Andy Beshear could potentially do pretty well. I think Kansas will not be safe, but most of the South would be. And Kentucky would be safe simply as a matter of partisanship, while statewide races like the governor's race are less polarized, so Andy Beshear could win there. It would be safe on the presidential level since they would vote for the preferred candidate, Donald Trump. So currently, Andy Beshear has a very large lead in safe states, 191 electoral votes, Donald Trump's 92. For likely states, I think Andy Beshear would win New Mexico and Virginia by a likely margin. Same thing with New Hampshire, and I actually think Maine at large and Minnesota, along with Nebraska's 2nd District, would all be likely. These are all likely states in 2020, and I think that Andy Beshear could potentially do better than Joe Biden, especially with ancestral Democrats and rural voters. For example, New Hampshire, Minnesota, great examples of blue-collar rural voters who used to vote for Democrats shifted to the Republicans because of Donald Trump. Andy Beshear could win them back. For Donald Trump, I think actually Montana would be safe. Alaska would be likely. Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska's 1st District, and South Carolina would all be likely. Same reasons as before, a lot of suburban and ancestral Democrats would go to Andy Beshear compared to Donald Trump. And now Andy Beshear remains in the lead with 226 electoral votes, and Donald Trump has 125 electoral votes. Now we get into some of the lean states. I'll go by the lean states, will go to the candidate by the bigger margin. So I think Michigan would be lean for Andy Beshear, and I think Nevada would be lean for him. Despite the fact that Donald Trump has made gains in Nevada in recent years, I think that Andy Beshear would do very well in Clark County, home of Las Vegas, and he'd also do very well in Washoe County, which is a suburban, more affluent county that is shifting to the left, and I think Andy Beshear would do very well there since many suburbanites do support him in Kentucky, which could translate to a win in Nevada by around 2.5%, similar to recent years, or even by a larger margin. For Donald Trump, I think Maine's 2nd District, Iowa, Ohio, and Texas would all be lean. I think that these margins would be reduced from 2020, in which they were all likely states, because of the aforementioned reasons of Andy Beshear being a strong candidate, and Iowa, Ohio, Maine's 2nd District, we all used to be Democratic states, or at least Ohio was a swing state, but a lot of those voters went to Donald Trump because of his stances on issues important to blue-collar workers. And since Andy Beshear has more popularity with them, they would go down by a margin just to be lean. I don't think Andy Beshear would win them, however. Texas also, I think Andy Beshear would do better in the Rio Grande Valley because of his, he would do better with the working class minorities. He'd also do very well in the suburbs, for example, Tarrant County, Denton, and Collin counties, and those are pretty much white counties that voted for Joe Biden, and I think Andy Beshear would do very well in those suburban counties. Anyway, I think that we have the swing states left: Arizona, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I'll start with Arizona. I think Andy Beshear would win that by a tilt margin, doing very well with the rural minorities. For example, in Navajo County, which is home of the Navajo tribe. And he'd also do very well in Maricopa County, home of the Phoenix city of Phoenix and its suburbs. And in Georgia, I think Andy Beshear would continue the state's trends to the left. and that would actually put him over the top with 274 electoral votes. So Andy Beshear would be elected the next president in this scenario. And for Florida, I think it'd be about 2% for Donald Trump. Andy Beshear may improve on Biden's margin, but Donald Trump has a very large amount of strength in that state, which I think Beshear would not be able to overcome. Now we have North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. All states that would be pretty close. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin I'd put as about tilt D, again because in Pennsylvania the blue trending suburbs would go for Andy Beshear. I don't think they would go for Donald Trump. And in the western portions of the state, for example Pittsburgh and Erie County, those are places that Andy Beshear could do very well in comparison to Joe Biden. So I think he'd win that state. In Wisconsin, Trump is very strong with blue-collar voters, and they may not abandon him for Andy Beshear by large enough margins for it to be lean. But I think that Andy Beshear would do very well in Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, and of course, its other city, which name I'm forgetting, Madison. So I think that Andy Beshear would do well enough there to win it, and he would improve with blue-collar voters and maybe in the suburban counties. And finally, we have North Carolina. North Carolina will be a very interesting state in this scenario because we have seen that North Carolina voters are pretty elastic. So for a candidate like Roy Cooper in the gubernatorial race, they will vote by pretty large margins for him. And a lot of suburban voters would abandon a pro-Trump candidate for someone like moderate, for example, I mentioned before Roy Cooper, and maybe someone like Andy Beshear. So I'm pretty bullish on North Carolina in many scenarios. I know I might get generate some controversy with this call, but I do think North Carolina would narrowly go to Andy Beshear. This is because a lot of the Western voters that are pretty much ancestral Democrats, people who have abandoned the Democratic Party in recent years, would go for Andy Beshear. Many of the more conservative suburbanites who vote for Donald Trump may like the fact that Andy Beshear isn't super socially liberal, but he does have some economic policies that appeal to blue-collar workers as well. And that coalition is a winning coalition in North Carolina, so I think he would win. Here's the final map. Andy Beshear at 319, Donald Trump at 219. A lot of tilt states, as you can see, so it wouldn't exactly be a blowout. It's not like Andy Beshear would win states in the Rust Belt by likely margins or anything like that, but he would improve enough to win them nevertheless. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It helps more people see that on YouTube, and you can subscribe to my channel to help me generate more content. Leave a comment telling me what your prediction would be. You can subscribe to the channel on the right, and on the left you can watch another video custom tailored to your interests picked by YouTube. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all